Well, that's that. They've done it again and gone too far this time. Lord knows I've tried to be nice. I've bent over backwards in the past for Mr. Plumley, and I'm not one to gossip, but honestly, second prize. Only second. Everyone has always admired my fondant fancy, but since Mrs. Blunkett was widowed and appeared on that calendar, it's all changed. 10 years of first prizes sacrificed on the altar of her pineapple pagoda, and the year before that it was a coconut chateau. I think she meant gâteau, but she didn't go to grammar school. I know for a fact that her recipe appeared on that Jamie Blumenthal, or was it that strange Heston chap? And he wrote up, her recipe wasn't original, and that's against the rules. And to think that she had the gall to pose for that calendar, hiding her bosoms behind a couple of dahlias. With her figure, she would have done better with a couple of potted palms. Mrs. Jackson said the Hanging Gardens of Babylon would be more appropriate, but she can't be catty. I declined to make an appearance, despite Mr. Plumley's encouragement. I didn't think that it was quite nice, even though they said it was for a good cause. So now, 2 years of second prizes, and after all that I've done, I've been making the cricket team's teas since Noah were a lad. There have been times when I've been up to my elbows in cucumber and tinned salmon, and did I complain? No, I did not. It's just not in my nature to do that and make a fuss. Well, there was a time when Mr. Plumley was all over me, but that all changed after Mrs. Blunkett got rid of her widow's weeds. Well, it'll be a long while before he'll get another chance to tuck into my dumplings. It's not right, what with him being head judge of the cookery section of the Walmsley WI's annual fete, and I think that I may be forced to speak out, even though it's quite against my nature. Mrs. Jackson says that she's seen them coming down to the Black Bull on their curry quiz night. I wouldn't mind, but he turned his nose up in my poppadoms. What can I do? I've thought about having it out with them, but it might sound like sour grapes, and I'm not prepared to give her the satisfaction. I've thought about a charm offensive on Mr. Plumley, but he seems to have quite gone off the temptations of my angel cake. So there's nothing left but to resort to the use of poison. Poison letters, I mean. And I started tonight with a letter to the Examiner. I signed it, Worried Walmsley, and drew attention to the need for impartiality in the judging of cookery competitions. I think it would make a nice change to all those letters about litter and dog fouling. Well, a cup of Ovaltine, and I'll just type my little piece of gossip for the parish magazine before it's up the wooden hill for me. I'm quite famous for my writing. They call me Mrs. Diary in the village. Monday, 23rd of August. My letter to the Examiner has been published. I won't let it go to my head, but it is good to see one's literary efforts recognised. I thought that they would see that my style was a cut above the run-of-the-mill. I had another surprise today. Mrs. Bottomley called to see me. At first I thought she was going to resurrect the previous unpleasantness about the lawnmower, but no, she just smiled and asked to come in. Well, I couldn't really refuse, so in she comes. I could see her looking around, checking on my dusting, but she won't find a speck of dust in my house. After discussing a few friends that we have in common, she got down to it. Apparently, she and Mr. Bottomley have won a month-long holiday in Spain and need someone to look after their elderly dog, as she doesn't feel it's right to put him into kennels. Would I do it? I said that with my committees and a little writing I plan to do, stretching a point, but I do have plans, but I wasn't sure if I had the time. She said she had thought of that, and would it be all right if I did the mornings and her mother-in-law would do the evenings? Well, I felt a bit trapped, but I had to agree. She finished her hobnob, gave me her mobile number, and off she went. Mobile number? What does she want with one of those things? Anyway, I'm glad she didn't raise the issue of the lawnmower now. I was a bit worried when she turned down the offer of my rock cakes. I'd suggested them, and she'd said that while she admired the eponymous nature of my rock cakes, she preferred the hobnob. I spent most of the afternoon composing another letter to the examiner. At first I was going to complain about people parking in the Easterby lay-by late at night, but I didn't want to be thought a busybody, and so I wrote a helpful hint letter. I suggested that a plastic bag placed over one's knickknacks would make dusting so much easier. I wrote a covering letter to the editor explaining I had dozens of tips like these, and would she like me to send them in for a weekly column. I must remember to look up eponymous the next time I use the dictionary, but I'll put my letter in the post now so that I catch the evening collection. Monday, 6th of September. I've been feeding the dog for a few days now. It's not too bad, but he does rush at the door when I come in. Well, I say rush, but at his age it's more of a determined amble than a rush. Anyway, it seems to be working out. I feed and walk the dog in the morning, and Mrs. Bottomley Senior does the evening. It must be a bit of a strain for her now that she's 92, but she doesn't grumble. Well, not about the dog walking anyway. Just don't get her onto her arthritis. She goes on for a quarter of an hour about how she can't get around like she used to, but she manages to get across the Black Bull often enough. So after I'd fed Toby, I thought I would catch the bus into Leeds to do a bit of shopping. Living in the countryside is beautiful, but every now and again I can feel Marx's calling to me. I'd asked my friend Mrs. Pettigrew if she wanted to come along, but it was her turn to do the flowers in the church and she had to cry off. So in I go, thinking I'll do a bit of shopping and have one of their £10 lunches. Very good value because you get a glass of wine free. The funny thing was, I saw Mrs. Pettigrew as the bus was leaving, and she was in her car and going in completely the opposite direction. Oh, she does get confused at times. Mr. James was on the bus too. He didn't sit by me, but as he went past, I saw that he'd buttoned his cardi up wrongly. He missed the bottom button and then was one out all the way up. It made him look like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I had a bit of a do in Marx's. I was standing admiring some of the lingerie, not that anything would fit me, and I was just having a feel of the fabric the way that you do, and I must confess that my mind had wandered off a bit when, bang, I was hit in the leg by a wheelchair. I turned around about to have my say, but then you can't when it's the disabled, can you? The lady pushing the wheelchair said, "Well, I did say excuse me." She might have, because I must confess I got lost in a bit of a reverie. And so, even though I had tears in my eyes, I said it was quite all right. No sooner had they gone, when a lady standing opposite said that she hadn't said excuse me at all, and had just shoved into me like a Roman charioteer. Give them a disabled sticker and they think they own the place. I felt a bit put out, but I went to pay for the few things that I bought prior to going for my lunch. I was standing in the queue when I realised that the woman behind me was none other than Spartacus, the Roman charioteer. She's got her back to me, with the wheelchair hidden, in the hope that I won't recognise her. Well, my blood was up. I thought for a minute what I might do, and in the end I wheeled round, intending to give her a good solid clunk on the thigh with the edge of my leather rattly bag. Never seen such a fuss. She had turned round, and I hit the poor child in the wheelchair full in the face. I'd caught her clean on the nose. There was blood everywhere. I had to call the first aiders and everything. What's a fuss? I said to whack a cold key down her back and that would stop it. Her carer got on a high horse at that and said not only was it a very old-fashioned notion, but her daughter's neck brace meant that it wasn't feasible. In the aftermath, I felt terrible. Well, it's left a nasty stain on my Radley, and I can't find my little Scotty dog anywhere. Wednesday, 8th of September. Oh dear. The loss of my Radley Scotty dog was some kind of portent for the future. I'd no sooner driven to Mrs. Bottomley's through the mist and opened up the front door when Toby made a dash for freedom. It wasn't quite to Steve McQueen's standard, but he did manage to squeeze past my legs and off he went. I went out and called, but he was nowhere to be seen. I felt quite bad about it because I'd left the drive gate open and he could be anywhere in the Dales by now. I had to ring Mrs. Bottomley Senior and give her the news. She was very understanding and said that she felt sure that he would come back when he was hungry. She said that she would come across this afternoon to entice him home. When I got back home, I had another letter from the Examiner. It was exciting. I opened it up in the hope that they might have taken me up on my handy hints column, as I now thought of it. But no. They said they thought it was an excellent idea and that the editor herself would certainly be covering her knickknacks with plastic bags from now on, but they didn't think that the column had legs. I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but they went on to ask, would I consider becoming the paper's agony aunt? Apparently, the current writer's husband has run off with an 18-year-old Thai that he'd been talking to on the internet, and there was a vacancy. Would I consider it, as they felt I had exactly the right tone and maturity to carry it off? If I was interested, then I was to reply and give them my mobile number and email address. I was to file my piece by noon each Wednesday in Word format. I was to devise my own nom de plume, as they felt it was time to change. I don't have a mobile, and I certainly don't have an email address or even computer, and I thought that if the previous agony aunt had done the same, then her husband wouldn't be eating lotuses in Phuket now. Oof, I do wish I'd changed that name. I'm never quite sure how to say it. I was so excited that I decided to drive into Leeds there and then. I usually catch the bus as parking can be so difficult. It took some time as the mist was only just lifting. On the journey, I tried to think what my nom de plume would be. In the end, I settled on Auntie Chris. I thought it sounded sufficiently mature without being old-fashioned and was an approachable sort of name. Auntie Chris I should be. I bought a mobile and a computer. I bought a laptop, as they have them in pink, and apparently it's got all the RAMs I will ever need. I've signed up for the internet too. I took the mobile phone with me, but the nice man is coming to set it all up for me tomorrow. He said that people of my age might want to set their phones to ring and vibrate, so they would know even if they were a little hard of hearing. I made it quite clear that that wasn't the case with me, but he might as well leave it, just in case Mrs. Pettigrew ever wanted to use it. I went home via the Bottomleys, but there was no sign of Toby. Thursday, 9th of September. I awoke early. I've had a bit of a restless night with thoughts of how Auntie Chris might answer some problems and worrying about poor old Toby. I got up, it was still quite dark and the mist was back, but I decided to go and make a determined effort to find him. The drive across was really quite difficult, with the mist being very patchy and thick in places. As I dropped down the hill to the bottomless house, it was a real pea super. I think I must have knocked one of their ornamental dragons as I turned into their drive, as there was quite a bump. I'll have to apologise if I've broken it, but it won't be any loss. I've no idea why anyone should think that a couple of 2 feet high ornamental Chinese dragons have any place in Yorkshire anyway. I called and called, but no sign of Toby. I thought at one stage that I heard a little whimper, but I must have been mistaken. I went round to the back and called, and then round to each side, and then spent ages at the front. I was becoming a bit cross now, ungrateful little beggar, and me having to drive across to feed him each morning. I went in and made myself a cuppa, helped myself to a couple of her hobnobs, and waited for the mist to clear. Didn't take long. I went out and went through the whole rigmarole again, but still no sign. I left some food in his little bowl and put it by the front door, popped into the car and started for home. I was just approaching the gate when I saw him in the drive. I pulled up and dashed to get him before he ambled off again. I needn't have rushed, as he didn't move an inch, nor was he ever likely to again. That bump wasn't an ornamental dragon. It must have been Toby. I didn't know what to do. I think that I must have panicked, because I scooped him up and I put him in their chest freezer between the beef burgers and the Viennettas. I couldn't phone the bottomless with the bad news, even though I had my mobile with me, but rang Mrs. Bottomley Senior instead. I must have been in shock, because when she answered, I said, "Do you want the good news or the bad?" "Oh, good," she said. "You won't have to come over to feed Toby this evening." Well, of course, then I had to explain. I felt that she was a bit short with me. We agreed not to spoil the bottomless holiday, and that we would keep the news to ourselves until they came home. She would have a think about what to do, as she didn't think it was quite right to leave him in their freezer, and should let me know. I gave her my mobile number. I've been waiting for the chance. Well, at least they can throw away that ridiculous poop scoop bag dispenser, the one shaped like a bone that she fixes to her belt. I went home to wait for the nice man to come and set up my laptop. I think I'll offer him a cuppa and a couple of my rock cakes. Friday, 10th of September. He came. I'm all hooked up. Apparently I'm on dial-up, but he'll come back in a few weeks and put me on broad beam. He showed me how to Google and gave me an introduction to word processing. Oh, it's not a bit like the old Remington I used to use. It even checks your spelling for you. No more dictionaries for me. Oh, which reminds me, I still haven't looked up eponymous. I've got an email address. I'm auntiechris@hotmail.co.uk. I had an email almost immediately from the Hotmail team. I thought it was so nice to receive such a personal service that I wrote straight back, saying how pleasant it was to receive such attention, and that if they were ever in Walmsley, they could call in for a cuppa. I even wrote an email to the Examiner, letting them know my email address, mobile number, and nom de plume, and asked when they wanted me to start. I was a bit cheeky and asked how much I'd get paid. I was just having my 11s when my mobile rang. I had it in the front pocket of my pinny and it gave me quite a funny turn. It was Mrs. Bottomley Senior. She'd contacted a vet and he'd told her that we could take Toby to him and he would dispose of the remains, that we could arrange our own little burial, or he would put Toby into his own little mortuary until the Bottomleys came home. We put our heads together and decided it would be a bit of a shock to find him just gone, And so we would take him to the vet in Leeds and they could decide when they got home. Well, I say we, but she went straight into how bad her arthritis is at the moment, and how I did have a car, and it was clear I was going to have to do it on my own. I thought about taking him in the car, but I didn't want to put him in the boot because that's where I put my shopping. And I didn't want him all frozen and stiff on my back seat where he might start thawing, especially if his head was looking out the window. And so decided it would have to be the bus, even though it would mean a change at the bus station. So over I potter and get him out of the freezer. He's frozen solid with his legs all stuck out. I thought for ages how I might get him into Leeds, and in a moment of inspiration, I toddled off and fetched one of the bottomless biggest suitcases. It was difficult to get him in. If I got his body in, then a leg would pop up. And if I got his legs in, then his head reared up and looked over the side. In the end, I just pushed him in and threw myself down. It was a bit of a funny noise, but at least I had him ready now, and off we went to the bus stop. It was much heavier than expected, and I wish that I could have got one of those suitcases with little wheels on, but I managed to lug him down to the bus despite being a bit red in the face when I got there. All went well on the way into Leeds. The driver helped me on with the case and off we went. When we got to Leeds, I found out where I had to go for the Kirkstall bus and was just dragging the case over when a young man asked me if he could help. I was so pleased to find that, despite his appearance, he had the manners of a gentleman, that I said, "Oh, yes please," and off I went. I'd gone about 10 yards and I looked over my shoulder, only to find that he was running off with the bottomless case in the opposite direction. I thought of shouting, "Stop thief!" but no one would take a blind bit of notice. I thought about going to the police, but then started to imagine how the interview might go. And what was in the suitcase, madam? A frozen dog. And then I thought of that, all the fuss of that lady who'd accidentally knocked a cat into a wheelie bin, and thought I'd better not bother, or else I'd find myself incarcerated in Dartmoor or on my tube. I decided not to waste the journey and popped into Waterstones and bought Internet for Dummies. I thought I would start small and build up. It tells you all about the wild, wonderful, wacky web. I'd always wondered what that WW business was about. I had a quick look at the index. It tells you about emails, twittering and blogging, whatever they are. I'll even be able to have my own website. On the journey back home, I thought I would use my new computer to write a little poem for the bottomless by way of an obituary. I think that I might look for a little picture of a dog on it and perhaps a black border of little doggies round the edge. By the end of the journey, the best I could come up with was violets are blue, roses are red. I'm so sorry that Tub is dead. I had to phone Mrs. Bottomley Senior when I got in and recounted my story. She started crying, so I thought I would tell her my little poem. It must be far more touching than I thought, because she sobbed even more. She must have liked it though, because she said, "Oh, it's just like William McGonagall," and then broke down completely. I can't wait to get home so I can ogle William McGonagall. People can be so nice, even in the face of adversity. I think it was the page. Monday, 20th of September. With the help of my book, I feel quite an expert now, and I've had another 2 emails. One from the Examiner and one from someone I didn't recognise. The Examiner said that they thought Auntie Chris was an excellent choice and that perhaps I might submit a trial piece where I make up a problem and then give an answer. If it's okay, then they will publish it with an announcement that the paper has a new agony aunt. At first I thought this might not be ethical, but I'm sure most of them published are made up anyway, and so I thought, jump on the bandwagon. I'll have to get my thinking cap on.